Hi, I'm Bob Dixon. Welcome to the Eagle Insight Podcast, your go-to source for bold and actionable leadership insights. With more than 30 years as a military officer and a strategist, I know leadership is about real impact. In this series, I sit down with top industry leaders to uncover their challenges and their success secrets. Ready to elevate your leadership? Well, hit subscribe. And if you'd like to be a guest, visit 5eaglesleadership.com/interview. Let's dive in. Hey, welcome back to the Eagle Insight Podcast, where we help leaders in every industry get just a little bit better every day. Today, we're talking to Brad Spears. He's a great friend. He's a coach, an adjunct professor, an Air Force veteran, and a great human being. One of the things about Brad is that he's got this incredible operational experience, but he can back it up with also incredible academic rigor. So where theory meets practice in the real world. Brad, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks, Bob. It's good to be with you and looking forward to the conversation today.
So I haven't seen you for a couple of years. Last time we got to hang out together, we were at the War College together and we were playing a lot of volleyball. I know that you continue to do, we both had assignments after that experience, and then we both retired. And for some reason, both of us went into very similar businesses as coaches for leaders in the private sector. So how's your journey going with that? Tell us about how you're bringing that expertise that you have to your clients.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah, and I remember those days on the volleyball court, and lots of lessons learned out there for some middle-aged men trying to play volleyball. But no, so after I left the Army War College there, where we crossed paths, I spent a lot of time in Europe, both doing some operational planning and then leading an organization of about 2,000 folks. Pretty unique organization that was spread out across 6,000 miles. So think from the middle of the Atlantic all the way, to the Afghanistan, and it got a good experience in both the operational and crisis realms during that time frame, and then just to put a lot of the lessons learned and the thinking that we did there at War College, to boot, and we put it to practice, right? And then the final kind of stop on the train for me in my 30-year Air Force journey was here at the University of Colorado at Boulder, where I had the opportunity to run the 5th largest Air Force ROTC program in the nation, with about 200 cadets, and also do some work with the Center for Leadership here at the university. And so, again, marrying that operational experience and the thinking that I had done in that last third of my career as a commander with the theoretical frameworks around developing leaders, it was a great combination, and that's really what had me excited about getting into the leader development and leadership consulting / executive coaching business. Is really just how do you take that theory, turn it into practice, but most importantly, give folks that are interested in being better and helping their teams be better, helping them through that process.
Yeah, it's interesting that you had such a huge area when people, some leaders complain about the remote workforce, and I'm listening to like, okay, we're stretched from the stands out to Europe and everywhere in between. Talk about a remote workforce, but you have to have the right people in the right seats, and you have to have the right processes in order to be able to lead a remote workforce that's that diverse across that distance. And those kinds of experiences, I think, really help you as a coach connect with some of the challenges that other people have in the private sector.
Yeah, and one of the things we found with that remote workforce that you talked about is where you see your return on investment for the development, and the time that you've spent, because you have these subordinate leaders that are on their own on an island ostensibly, and they need to have the skills and the knowledge and the competencies really in their toolkit to be able to excel in those situations, right? And so we really learned that spending the time up front and spending the money up front to develop them, paid dividends, not only in the culture, overall culture of the organization, but in thinking about the teamwork and communication that was needed to bridge that distance, but really in being ready, for the future and the future challenges that would come. And we had no way of knowing that, when we started on that journey in 2016, when I was the vice commander, and then 2018 when I became the commander of this organization, that we were going to face COVID and
Right.
the challenges that came with that, and talk about trying to fly, and support strategic airlift throughout Europe and Africa and the Middle East when COVID came online. And so
Wow.
a
Yeah.
lot of the investments that we made in our leaders paid huge dividends and allowed us to do things like, move the first COVID positive patient out of Afghanistan and in back to Germany to get healthcare that wouldn't have been available in Afghanistan. And then we were able to repeat that process. And it was all because we had invested previously in our leaders.
So I love how you call it an investment, right? When I talk to a lot of business leaders, they're like, "Oh, how much does leadership development cost?" And they're very concerned about cost, and rightfully so. It is an expense, both in terms of time and energy and fiscally.
Mhm.
But when you frame it as an investment, right, you start to look at it a little bit differently.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you can talk about it in terms of dollars. And, I think research has borne out that for every dollar spent, you'd see $7 back in the um, return from that money. And especially if you lean into not just programmatics, but support mechanisms that make this not just a one-off event, but you've got an opportunity to support it with coaching and mentorship programs that keep it in a make it sustainable or in longitudinal, that you get even more. And I think the numbers go up to 10 times the number of dollars spent on that. And that's just the money side, not let alone the intangibles that you get because you've got a culture where the folks in your organization understand that you're willing to invest in them, and
Right.
not just as employees, but as members of a high functioning team and that want to be better every day.
Yeah, and you mentioned the culture piece. So I think that investment in leader development and not just leader development, right? It's also skill development
Mhm.
for people who are maybe not leaders or not in leadership positions. But the sense that they have when you're willing to put your money where your mouth is on that you actually do care about them and you care about the future of the organization and you see a place with them in the organization in the future.
Yeah.
I think that fosters that sense of belonging that then maybe motivates people to bring their best to your organization.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there. I think that bringing your best, that's what we need to be, aiming for inside of our organizations. And sometimes we talk about this in terms of productivity, or sometimes we talk about it in terms of efficiency. But let's just say that you can accomplish more and at a faster rate if you've got folks in your organization that are bringing their A game every day
That's
to
right.
work. And so the question really becomes for us as leaders is how do we do that? And I think one of the ways we do that is we invest in the people, right? And whether it's the training and we're trying to upskill, or whether it's we are trying to move our supervisors to be better leaders, or whether we're trying to move middle management into the C-suite, it all plays into the bottom line, which is we're going to get more out of our folks if we've poured into them.
Yeah, I love this term discretionary effort, right? And that's people have a choice when they show up in the morning how much effort they're going to make. Most people will meet the minimum standards that you put in front of them. If they know what the standards are, if you've communicated those clearly, they'll meet those standards.
Yeah.
Those that are engaged, those that care about your organization and feel like they belong, will use that as a baseline and then go well beyond that. But if you haven't connected with them, if they don't feel like they belong, that's going to be their top point. They're like, oh, well, that's the minimum standard. That's what I'm going to meet. And what I want is that gap between what they must do and what they can do. I want to tap into that potential and see how much more than the minimum standard that we can get out of folks. And when they feel like they belong, either through investment, through mentorship, through coaching, and through the culture that you create, now we're onto something. And the likelihood of them bringing that extra discretionary effort, it goes way up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is borne out, no matter what industry you're in, and that's really what you're looking for, is that ability to maximize the potential that you have in your organization to to not only drive the bottom line, but to drive humanity, really.
Oh, yeah. I think when I hear objections to the kind of this leadership philosophy of let's upskill and develop everybody, I hear, well, it's expensive. And then, oh, by the way, if I'm giving them additional skills and capabilities, what if they take that and they go someplace else?
Yeah.
What do you tell them then?
Now I say, great, because now we are pouring into our communities, and we're pouring in to the greater, humanity, and we've helped somebody to be better, and we've invested in them. And I think if somebody leaves an organization where they've been invested in, they're going to be a shareholder for all time. And if we think like that, if we think in terms of expanding the pie, and not keeping this fixed pie mindset, that
Yeah.
we're going to be better off. We're going to be better off.
I agree. I always warn leaders when somebody's leaving their organization, like how you say goodbye to them matters.
Yeah.
Right. And you can put now you've got trusted agents in other organizations because you trained them and you connected with them and you made it possible for them to live their dream, even if it's with another company. But now you've got a trusted agent in that company. I don't know if it's a company you need to work with or not. It doesn't really matter because you're interconnected with other organizations that can make the entire business community better.
Yeah, I love that thinking, and it's a leap, right? Because a lot of times we're focused on the short term, and we're focused on this quarter and next quarter, and we're not playing that long game. And so I think, to the extent that we can think about that long game, we can be in a better space to make the investments now that are going to pay dividends in the future. And
It's
certainly,
so difficult for some business leaders to play that long game, to think long term about the investment that I make in a worker upskilling and developing as a leader, because I've got quarterly reports that are due.
yeah,
And particularly if you're a publicly traded company and you have shareholders that are expecting growth quarter after quarter after quarter, it's hard to make those long-term decisions about investing in your workforce. So it's a coaching moment then, right? An opportunity to talk to the senior leaders about having a long view.
yeah, absolutely. And it's not. I mean, let's face the facts. It's not easy if you're having to deliver on the bottom line. At the end of this quarter, you may not be willing to wait, and but that short sightedness is going to catch up to you in future years. And so, thinking about it as an investment, I think, is the best way to think about it. And the dividends or the return may be coming in future quarters.
I think so too, and I think there are some titans of business that have talked about that. I mean, Warren Buffett doesn't do quarterly reports for a reason.
Yeah.
He's like, no, we're playing a long game. And if you don't like it, you want a quarterly report, go to someplace else. And it turns out nobody leaves. Um, but there's also leaders like Bezos who would say, I'm not looking at next quarter, I'm looking 3 years down the road.
Yeah.
And I love that philosophy because then it gives you the freedom to then focus on, can I do something this quarter that will affect 3 years from now? And what is it that I would do? And it always comes back to people. It always comes back to, can I develop the right leaders, the right skills, the right knowledge, the right experiences for my workforce now so that they are better prepared 3 years from now?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's an investment in capital, and it's the human capital of your organization. And I love the reference to Bezos. And if you look back at some of the shareholder reports back 1996, 97, when he was standing up the company, and all of the grief that he caught because he was saying those things, that I'm not concerned about this quarter, next quarter. Heck, I might not even be concerned until the next 5 years. That's my sight picture. That and look at him now.
Yeah, he's doing okay. And so are the people that bet on him.
Yeah,
And I think a lot of leaders see that and they're like, well, it's easy for him. He's got, a multi-billion-dollar company. And like, yeah, but he didn't.
right.
Right. He started with this philosophy of let's play the long game and let's develop people over time. Let's develop our processes and our product over time. And you have a history of building over time. When you start talking about developing people from a starting point of maybe roughly zero leadership experience, and then 4 years later in ROTC, seeing men and women join the service as officers with presumably a reasonable amount of leadership capability. So tell us a little bit. I think our audience, there's many that don't understand what that journey is. So if you could kind of give us an overview of how you develop cadets over time while they're college students, and then maybe we'll explore that piece a little bit and how that might be a relevant example for some of our folks.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the Reserve Officer Training Corps for the services are ostensibly the largest, commissioning sources for officers. And so you think about the academies, and certainly the service academies are turning out officers. But like I said, majority of the officers are coming out of Reserve Officer Training Corps. And so you have these college students that are coming to you 18 years old, and in 4 years, you're turning them out ready to lead, airmen or guardians in our case, but, on the case of the Army or the Navy, soldiers, sailors, Marines. And how do you go about taking somebody that's 18 years old, straight out of high school, and turning them in 4 years into somebody that's capable of leading other men and women in the service, and to do that, in harm's way a lot of times. And so the word that I come back to every time is deliberate. We went through a deliberate process, to do this, and really thinking about what needed to go in to that process is important, and then how you build from year one to year two to year three to year four, and the support that you provide that, and the ecosystem that you built where it can thrive. And so, one of the theories of development, and I think that this works in many contexts, is to go through a process where you assess, where you learn, where you have an opportunity to practice, and then you have an opportunity to reflect. And so the assessment is, who are we getting, and what do they already have in their toolkit? And this is different for every individual. And then it's about, okay, the curriculum. What do we need to learn? And when you're running a large program, a lot of the curriculum is given to everyone, but certainly you can tailor it as needed for particular individuals. And that's really where you get a better return on investment, is when you can tailor it. But the big thing is this, what we call leadership laboratory. And it's the practice environment. It's where you're taking these thoughts, this knowledge, sometimes skills that you're learning in the classroom, and you're putting it into practice, and you're trying it out in a safe environment and seeing what works for you, what doesn't work for you. And then following that up with reflection, because we don't get smarter or better just by doing things. We actually get smarter or better by reflecting on things and figuring out what actually happened here and how can I make a change for the future. And in going through that deliberate process of assess, learn, practice, reflect, and driving that continually throughout the organization, and having an ecosystem that supports that, so that individuals are getting mentored and coached inside of this system, kind of driving that reflection, because it's a mandatory part of the program, right? Right? Because we don't like to do it as humans. We don't like to stop and do that.
Yeah, I think there's a really important point about that reflection piece is we could do it on our own. Like, let me just sit back and think about my day and think about what I could have done better. And that can be useful, but guided reflection. When I have somebody asking me hard questions that I won't necessarily ask myself, and then when I bullshit myself, I have a coach or a leader who's going, hey, that sounds like you're tap dancing around the real issue. Let's pull on that thread a little bit. And they start to poke at you enough that you find the soft spots and make you deal with it. And that's where the real learning happens.
Absolutely. And that is why, after a 30-year career in the Air Force, I find myself in the coaching business, because it's that power in asking the tough questions, in kind of forcing that reflection process. That's where the growth and the learning happens. That's where the impact is in this process. And so, yeah, you're absolutely right on that account. And it's very easy to say, yes, I'm going to sit over here, take some quiet time and reflect. But I don't know about you, but I'm not going to ask myself those hard questions. And if I do, then I'm probably going to skirt the answer.
That's right. That's right. So having a trusted agent or a coach or a mentor ask you those hard questions and force you to answer them and deal with those things is incredibly valuable.
Yeah.
And I think in the workplace we see that we don't necessarily have a leadership laboratory where we get to practice. So every day is an opportunity and experiential learning, and we can get better, but that reflection piece is incredibly important. One of the things the military does exceptionally well is provide opportunities for leadership learning.
Mhm.
And part of that is still remember, being a private in the Massachusetts Army National Guard. And I, somehow became the senior private among three of us and was put in charge of two other people. For about 3 hours, I was in charge.
Yeah.
But in those 3 hours, I learned a ton about, hey, I'm going to be held accountable for the actions of other people. Oh, that's different from just being a good
Mhm.
worker. Right? I always had a good work ethic. I always did a good job of things. But now I've got to be accountable for the work of other people. And that's kind of the crux of leadership is that you have to get things done by, with, and through other people. And so that experience, it only lasted a couple of hours. And then afterwards, my sergeant said, okay, how'd that go? And I started like, oh, now I'm going to, so he was doing that reflection piece with me. And the military provides so many opportunities before you're actually in that position to be held accountable 24 hours a day.
Mhm.
You've had all of these practice repetitions. in your commissioning source, in your training, in day-to-day operations where like, okay, we need somebody to be in charge. Dixon, you're in charge.
Yeah.
I don't see as many opportunities in the private sector where leaders have created those opportunities for their junior folks to get what in I, I coach youth soccer, so I have a lot of soccer terms about this. But when you're training a goalie, when you're getting ready to give them some hard stuff to do, the first thing you do is you kick the ball straight at them a bunch of times and give them confidence catches. That they're confident that they have the right form to catch the ball every time, and then you give them the hard stuff. Leadership's the same way of giving them some confidence catches, some confidence leadership opportunities where they start to feel like, hey, I can do this. And I think the military does it so well and so frequently that we don't even notice it most of the time.
Yeah.
So I don't know how you might translate that to the private sector in creating those opportunities for people and for leaders to mentor and be that reflective coach.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there is so much goodness in having those opportunities to just practice and figure out what is it that I learned here and what now? What can I do with that, that I learned in that? But you have to have the opportunity. And the thing that's I'm thinking of when you're talking about that is risk. And so a lot of leaders will be hesitant to give that opportunity because there's some either real or perceived risk in that opportunity to allow somebody to take control of something that should ordinarily be in my control. And so we see that especially, with emerging leaders that they want to hold tight to something because there's the risk for them is the fear of failure. And so the better leaders are the ones that have developed, understand that the real risk is in not allowing folks to have that opportunity and to fail. And so as leaders, one of our jobs is to manage that risk. And so thinking about the risk equation there, I think can maybe open up the space for folks that might otherwise be reluctant and say, this is so important that I cannot afford to let go for 12 hours and let somebody else take a swing at this, and then the worst is, well, maybe they actually do it better than I do it. Right. And but that's learning as well. And so I think just how do you read that risk equation for yourself, and those leaders that are leaning in and thinking about how to make their organization better are thinking about where is the next opportunity for the folks in my organization to try something out.
Yeah, the opportunity to get those confidence catches when the stakes are low is a luxury I think that the military has, right?
Mhm.
Because we invest in them as cadets, we invest in them as junior leaders, and give them opportunities to do additional things that will give them those practices. And small businesses in particular have a difficult time. They don't have low risk operations or opportunities, right? You don't have a leadership laboratory, so you're going to have to put something on the line.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to, and that's part of the investment. And I think leaders that think of it as part of the investment. Okay, I'm going to risk this sale by allowing this new leader to run the sales process for this client.
Mm-hmm.
That's a risk. But I think if you think of it in terms of the investment, like if they never get that opportunity, they're never going to be able to help us move the organization forward. And that's your real risk is that not investing in them is going to keep all of your people at the same level that they showed up as.
Absolutely. And as I'm, was mentoring emerging leaders, that is a conversation that we would have routinely is by holding on to this yourself, you are keeping an opportunity from your peer or your subordinate to learn and grow, just like you were given an opportunity to learn
Right.
and grow. And it's really that that mindset about thinking about how do you develop those that are coming in behind us. And for small businesses, it's really about how do founders and small teams that have multiple hats, how do they empower other folks in the organization to take on the pieces of the business that they don't absolutely have to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's through practice and in repetition that's supported by that reflection, that coaching, and asking powerful questions about what did you learn here, and what was the insight that you gained, and how would you apply that next time. And to be fair, it's an investment not only of money but of time, right? That is um, you know time intensive to be able to do that, but I think you can put some mechanisms in place that can allow you to have a sustainable and repeatable process. And the thing I think about is an individualized development plan. And so thinking about what each leader in your organization or emerging leader in your organization might need to do, right? And I start off with that assessment, where are they? What do they need to work on? And sometimes you can just ask questions like that. Other times you may want to invest in a 360-degree assessment, or, I use one, it's called PDP Pro Scan, that talks about, strengths and decision making and stress and how you're showing up to the work environment, but to give you a jumping off point, and then focus your development on not everything, because I mean, you can find 118 different things in leadership and management to work on, right? And you can read, a LinkedIn post, or you can go read a book, but find just one or two things that you can focus on, and then support that. Learn about it, practice it, support it with some reflection in coaching, and be better.
Yeah, one of my coaches. So, as a certified high performance coach, I get to listen to Brendan Burchard coach, and it's very fun to watch. It's very great to be part of that organization and that community. And one of the things he talks about is pick a skill every month. Like, I want to work on this leadership skill this month. And you'd be very deliberate about that. Like, before the first of the month, let's think through, how am I going to get better at delegating, for example?
Yep.
What is that going to look like? What should I, if it's February is delegation month, then at the end of the month, how good at delegating am I going to be? What does that really mean? And if you're working with a coach, that coach can help you lay that out so that at the end of the month, you are exponentially better at that particular skill. And oh, by the way, in the middle of that month, we're going to start talking about what March is going to be about. And you start to lay out that. And if you picked up 12 skills a year and really honed in on them every month, how much of a better leader are you going to be with 12 additional now graduate level skills? The sky's the limit when you start to think about your progression as a leader that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And key one or two things
Yes.
that you can focus on, and then thinking about translating this into the small business environment. Those IDPs, or the individual development plans, can become a part of the performance review process. And now you're starting to make some evaluations around how your folks are growing and how they're developing, and that can be the basis of that those one-on-one conversations that you have, and those things can be aligned to the organization's strategy. And so now the investment is is being made not just for the individual, but for the organization. What does this individual need to bring to the team that is going to, continue to enhance our business and our bottom line?
So I love that, Brad.
Hey, it's Bob Dixon here with a quick invite for you. If you're ready to revolutionize your leadership, listen up. You're invited to our new monthly workshop called Total Leader Concept. In just one session, you'll get real battle-tested strategies from my 30 plus years of military and business experience. Imagine unlocking tools that not only help you tackle challenges head on, but also empower you to inspire and transform your team. This is your chance to break free from the old habits and become the leader you're meant to be. Spots are limited, so act fast. Visit 5eaglesleadership.com/workshop and secure your seat today. And let's redefine your leadership together.
The idea of if I have a big, hairy, audacious goal, and I say that in 10 years we're going to be, here, here, and here, and these are our goals, and then I break that down and say, in order to get there, in 3 years I have to have these kinds of things accomplished, and then I have my 1 year picture, and now I know what I'm working on each quarter. All right, what does the team need to look like? What is the collective skill sets that we need to be able to function that way 3 years from now? Well, I'm going to need to have somebody who can do A, B, and C. Okay. Who on our team can develop that skill over the next 3 years?
Mm-hmm.
Now I've got a plan that's got some direction that's deliberately tied to our business plan. And it's deliberately tied to the ability for us to function at the level that we want to be in 3 years. Because sometimes these skills take a little while to get.
Yeah.
But if I'm tying the individual skills, not just to a desire from like I got one of my companies that I coach, they asked people, what skill would you like to have? And a bunch of people said they wanted to be able to speak a foreign language. Okay, great. How is that actually going to help our business? Now, I'm happy to help people. I guess we could all get you a premium version of Duolingo or something, but tie that to a business objective, and now I'm more likely to want to invest in it. And sure enough, it turns out that if we had more Spanish speakers in our sales force, we might be able to then break into a different market sector. Oh, now it's tied to something. Now maybe it's worth the investment of that. So I not just upskilling for upskilling's sake, but tying it to the business objectives. That's a great insight, Brad. I love that.
Yeah. And so now if you, elevate and start thinking about that at the individual level, but bring it up to the organizational level, you've got a business strategy.
Yeah.
And, a companion strategy would be your leadership development strategy. And those would be aligned so that what you just said is I've got a methodology and a plan to be deliberate about where I'm investing my dollars in developing leaders, developing individuals in the organization.
That's an awesome insight. I think a lot of times, even as a leadership coach, that we'll talk about. Well, let's just make leaders better. Like, okay, make leaders better specifically for what,
Yeah.
and better in what way. And there are some general principles of leadership that every leader should have mastered. The ability to hold people accountable, the ability to delegate in a meaningful way, and to develop their leaders. Lots of little fundamentals, but tying your leadership development plan, nesting it with your overall business strategy, I think is something that I hadn't thought about in that particular way.
Yeah. And, to your point, this leadership and context matters. And that's what I've, seen over the course of my career is I've, been in different facets of the military, whether it was special operations or logistics, and into the university environment is leadership and context matters. And so that's where you can bring everything together through this deliberate process, is because you're actually developing individuals, coaching individuals around their particular context and the particular challenge that they have today and the ones that we foresee for tomorrow.
Yeah, I think that's a great insight, and I think it's something that leaders need to be very deliberate about. And I don't think they're going to just stumble on that in their day to day. They're like, I've got to, do these invoices and pay these bills, and I need to, make sure the schedule is right. And oh, by the way, let me make sure that Bob has got a plan for his future and how it ties together with our business. Right?
Right.
That's not you. I think you have to take deliberate time
Mhm.
and maybe have some help thinking through the complexities of what's next for the business, which means what's next for our people.
Yeah. Yeah. And carving some time out of your offsite or your deliberate, strategy or planning sessions that you have to think about that and put some things that are actionable in place. I think that pays dividends as well.
Well, I think, and it's interesting you bring up offsites because a lot of companies do them that they go off and they work on their business plan. Sometimes they lack accountability mechanisms for actually implementing those things, which
Mhm.
drives me nuts. Um, but but I always wonder whether or not their leadership development plan is tied to that, because sometimes that'll be a breakout session. How do we develop our leaders? And it seems disconnected oftentimes.
Yeah. Yeah. I
So
think the best return is when they're connected and they're aligned, right? Just like
yeah,
we want alignment in our business strategy, we want our leadership strategy to be aligned.
yeah. So it's a wonderful insight, and I think it's a good challenge to put in front of leaders to say, first of all, do you have a leadership development program? Have you invested in it, or is it just an idea? And then, is your leadership development program aligned with your strategic goals?
Yeah.
Right. That's a great starting point for a conversation about how are you truly developing your team. And
Absolutely.
And then you can get into the specifics of what you were talking about in terms of assessing and learning and practicing and reflection.
Yeah. And in the three lenses that I normally, look at this through is the individual, the team, and then the organization. And so if you think about it in those terms, then you can tailor your development so that it is beneficial at all three levels of the organization.
Yeah, I love that. We talk about the total leader concept, where
Mhm.
where you said that you need to lead yourself first.
Yep.
That's the individual. You got to be able to lead others. That's your team, and
Yep.
then you have to be able to lead at the organizational level. That's different. The skills that you need for each of those domains are different, and they can be developed uh, simultaneously, but they are distinct.
Yes.
And I think when I usually start with a client, and we're starting with the individual, and we usually start with self-awareness. Let's talk about who you are and who you think you are. And oh,
Yes.
by the way, who do other people think you are? And that gap between who other people think you are and who you think you are is an important gap that we need to talk about.
Huge. Huge. That's why this whole process starts off with assessment, because you've got to know who you are and where you are in time and space, and then open up the aperture for that development and growth.
Yeah, I think Tasha Urich talks about the two types of self-awareness, where it's internal and external. Internal being you understand how you process emotions, your strengths and weaknesses, and that sort of picture. But the external piece is how well do you perceive how others perceive you?
Yes.
And if you've ever wanted to tell somebody, "Hey, read the room," there are leaders out there that lack that external self-awareness, even if they know themselves really well. They lack that ability to understand that they're not reaching
Right.
their people. Now, I don't know how much you were able to do in ROTC with helping leaders be more self-aware.
Yeah. So I think it's extremely important, and so we, spent a lot of time doing that, thinking about how to do that, and bringing it through, curriculum, the learning, piece, and talking about the, aspects of emotional intelligence, and then being able to practice that, and then to ask some questions about how is that going for you, that ability to understand the emotion, of the self, but also how do I regulate that emotion, and especially for young leaders, that's really important. And so, yeah, we made that a foundation of what we were doing in the organization, and we said that, hey, one of our outcomes is we wanted, emotionally intelligent officers, lieutenants that were ready to hit the force, because we thought that was a key competency.
I 100% agree that that's a key competency, and I think those leaders that have that intelligence, that emotional intelligence, have a sense of maturity about how they interact with others and how they understand others and themselves, just make for much better leaders. There are, I think, a lot of people that when they hear the term emotional intelligence, they think it's the soft skills. It's kind of a weak thing. What do you think when somebody says something like that?
Yeah, I don't really like the term soft skill at all. I think it is a fundamental competency, and so if you are going to be a functioning member of a team, just a follower, let alone a leader. But if you're just going to be a functioning member of a team, you have to have that competency in your toolkit.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you'll find yourself, you know, being set aside and not listened to. And you've got some things to bring to the conversation. And so, how do you do that in a way that is helpful to the team? Well, the way that you do that is you figure out, how do I need to interact with this team, and that starts with understanding, who you are and how you show up. And so, I don't like the term soft skill, because I just think it's such a fundamental competency.
I agree with you that it's absolutely fundamental. And what I tell leaders that say things like, "Hey, I don't really care what other people think of me. I just need them to do what I tell them to do." I'm like, okay, man. What research tells us is that people who say they don't care what other people think of them are usually the ones that care the most. Uh, it's fascinating research to see
Yeah.
the underlying psychology of a statement like that. But as a leader, if you don't care about how you're being perceived, how you're showing up to other people, I'm not sure how you can possibly connect with them in order to get them to do what you need them to do.
Yeah. And you can be as competent, as all get out, but if you're unable to connect with other people, then you might as well, throw it away, because you are degrading trust. Every time that you're unable to connect with somebody, you are degrading trust. And we know that, trust is the lubricant for leadership.
It's the coin of the realm for every organization. You can't function without it. And developing leaders to be cognizant of that and to learn the things that erode trust and the things that build trust, I think is fundamental to any leadership development program.
Yeah. It's funny. So being in a university environment, and coming to that from the operational forces, it was interesting, because a lot of people think that military leadership is about just telling people what to do.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I think you and I both have come to understand that that's a recipe for disaster, and our inability to compete with a near peer competitor if we are left with just that positional, authoritative model of leadership. It doesn't work in combat, and it certainly doesn't work in our small businesses.
Absolutely. I think you nailed it. That kind of mentality and leadership is really mostly about mentality when it comes right down to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, Brad, I can't thank you enough for sharing your insights. I'm so obviously passionate about leadership development and developing leaders and helping people who want to be leaders be their very best. And I know that that's the same mission that you're on, and I applaud you for it. And I'm glad to be partnered with you as well through Five Eagles as an affiliate coach. So if you're looking to partner with Brad as a coach, if you're in need of first class executive coaching, absolutely get in touch with us here at Five Eagles, or you can reach Brad directly. Brad, what's the easiest way to find you?
Yeah, easiest way to find me is at my website, 3cinsights.com, or meet me on LinkedIn, Bradley Spears.
Awesome, Brad. Thanks so much for your time and for your wisdom. And I can't wait to chat with you further.
Thanks, Bob. This has been a blast. And as always, appreciate your insights.